Right. Well, welcome everyone to Home Office Hours Live with this. Thank you so much for joining us today. If this is your first time joining us, quick intro to the series. Home Office Hours is a series of live discussions that we put together, and we're covering timely topics. We'll be featuring guest speakers as well as our own different team members. So we created this series because we know that small business needs have changed and we wanted to help. So we created this as a way to connect and to share advice during this time when we're all spending a lot of time working from our homes and we're dealing with various challenges. To have colleagues to help answer some of the questions that you're all having as business owners. And we also know that at Vistaprint, we serve another group or set of organizations, and that's nonprofits. And the nonprofit world has been rocked just as much by this pandemic as well as any other small business. So we have two people here with us today to talk about that perspective. So we've got Wes Enicks, Executive Director of Generations Incorporated. Wes, can you give us a wave? Hey, Wes. And we also have Sanjay Lobo, Chief onHander. Can you say hello, Sanjay?
Hi there, nice to see you all.
Hi. Well, thank you both for joining us today. So today, the three of us are going to talk about how you can navigate this new landscape as a nonprofit. But before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. We're going to take questions at the end of the session, but please feel free to submit them at any time through the session. If you're on Zoom, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And if you're joining us on the Facebook Live, you can just add your comments or add your questions in the comments there, and we'll receive those in the Q&A via the Zoom. So let's get started and kick it off with Wes. So Wes, thank you so much for taking some time to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about what you do at Generations Inc. and what is the organization?
Sure. So Generations Incorporated is a youth literacy organization that trains older adult volunteers to be literacy coaches to kindergarten through third graders in the greater Boston area. Traditionally, our volunteers support students with a leveled reading curriculum in the classroom during the school day or in the after school setting at Boys and Girls Clubs or during the summer at Boys and Girls Clubs as well.
That is an admirable mission. Thank you. Sanjay, how about you? Tell us a little bit about your organization and what you do there.
Hi there, so we're called onHand. We match local vetted volunteers to typically older adults that need help with really basic things. It's not professional care, it's the stuff that actually you struggle with. That's not professional care, like getting your shopping or changing a light bulb, things that at a certain age you just will struggle with. And there isn't really much support other than professional care, which is really expensive. So we match local volunteers that we vet to people that need help with really basic tasks.
Well, great. You both have very admirable missions. So happy to have you here with us. So, thank you both for setting the stage, telling us a little bit about what you do. Wes, I would like to, turn it over to you. How COVID-19 has affected your operations. Obviously, working with children, you've seen a huge impact.
Sure. So as a organization that has older adult volunteers as our kind of core program driver, if you will, at the beginning of March, given the increased risk, especially to older adults, we made the difficult decision to suspend our programming even before our school districts went fully remote out of abundance of caution. And then, as our school districts started to go fully remote, we tried to adapt our programming. And what I would say what we've done since March is really provide bridge support to those partners. First and foremost, our focus was on our older adults. So similar as Sanjay is talking about, kind of recognizing, especially in a situation such as a pandemic, how do we ensure that our volunteers have the resources they need, have access to food and other necessities that they may need during this unprecedented time. For our school partners and the students we serve, we had volunteers who were doing virtual read alouds, providing more literacy content and resources to our school partners and after school partners. We did have volunteers that were doing one-on-one reading sessions for students using Zoom to continue to support students. But it was very much a patchwork of support where we were adapting as we went to our school partners' needs. We really quickly, though, started to look long-term and recognize that we as an organization needed to understand if this is a longer term challenge related to the pandemic, how do we need to shift our programming to be able to look like our core programming has traditionally, which is to provide structured literacy intervention for the students we serve. And so we've really been working, and what we are working towards that I'll certainly talk more about is providing our one-to-one literacy intervention to students in a fully virtual setting. So having our volunteers through a virtual platform connect with the students that they're serving to provide half-hour reading and literacy sessions and to help students progress. And we believe, especially heading into next year, in the Boston area, what schools will look like is very up in the air and unknown. And so we believe that with this shift to virtual, we're going to be able to provide some consistency and continuity in a very uncertain climate, because we'll be able to support students whether they're at home or they're in school during the school day.
Changes so fun and more, and like you said, a lot of that is unknown, so definitely difficult to plan for. So, what are you thinking about and how making this shift to virtual in the fall? What steps are you taking? Knowing some of it, but a lot of it being.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we're trying to navigate what is the platform that we're going to be using. How can we make it as easy as possible for volunteers to access, as well as students. Certainly security is a paramount necessity, ensuring the safety and security of the students that we're working with, the oversight aspect, if you will. There are, logistics through a learning management system, such as the scheduling and the tracking of sessions. And so, I've been working with our team, and we are a part of a national network of organizations through AARP Foundation Experience Corps that have been working to finalize the details of this platform that will have the video visual element, because the relationship building, the mentorship aspect of our work is so key to the success in working with students, as well as the content. So how is the leveled reading curriculum being able to be provided virtually? Also recognizing we don't want technology and access to technology to be a barrier to participation. So whether that is recognizing older adult volunteers who need, Chromebooks or access to internet, and how we're able to provide that to them so that they can participate. And then also on the student side, locally, districts, especially Boston Public Schools and Revere Public Schools, who we serve, have done a great job of getting, technology into students' hands during the pandemic, but recognizing if there are any gaps there that we need to be aware of, and how we're able to help fill those gaps. I think also something we talk about organizationally is it's a major shift for our staff. We have a staff and a program team that is used to working in the field. They're used to being physically present in schools, partnering with administrators, talking to teachers. And now we're saying to them, your job is going to be managing a program entirely virtual. And so that means really being able to provide them the training, the skills to be able to adapt and work in a different way than they maybe are used to.
Definitely a lot of things to think about and a lot of considerations right now. But Sanjay, I'm going to throw it back to you for a minute here. Tell us how COVID's affected operations. Obviously, a different organization, a whole other set of considerations. What have you been thinking? How have you been adjusting?
Yeah, much like Wes, lots of things that have come along, and you've had to challenge us in all aspects of what we do. And that's from the service we're providing. Essentially, we did a lot of stuff face to face in people's homes, and overnight that disappeared. So I think in the first week where COVID really hit, we saw a reduction in the demand for what we were doing massively drop off. And then we quickly adapted to, okay, well, what can we do with our volunteers who are still allowed to, we're in the UK, by the way, we're still allowed to leave home if they were doing something for someone else who was vulnerable, which is what we do. So we quickly changed the service to, okay, we can still do shopping, but instead of going into the home and putting it into the fridge and checking for out-of-date stuff, hey, we're going to have to drop it to the front door, ring a bell, and step way back. So we've got some social distancing going on. And the same with medicine drops. So we never used to collect prescriptions, but we started collecting prescriptions. For people who couldn't take out their pets, we'd still do dog walking, and then a lot of phone-based companionship type stuff. So we changed the service pretty much in the first week. But we also had to address some fundamentals with our model. So the way we worked prior to COVID was we provided a service to someone, and we would ask them to contribute to our finances. So the person receiving the help would ultimately help pay for our service. Mm-hmm. Like overnight also, that felt completely wrong. So in the whole COVID scenario, that would be asking the most vulnerable person to make a contribution for essential services. So we stopped charging. We stopped charging, and we were lucky that we'd been speaking to local governments in a number of areas prior to COVID kicking in. And one of them immediately came and asked us to come and help them. So we had a volume of volunteers. Can they come and help in this particular district? And yeah, it was amazing, and help all of the residents. So we saw, so from overnight seeing 50% or more of our demand disappear, it then started jumping out the 100% growth, 200% growth, and 400% growth, and so forth, very, very fast. We were lucky that we'd done a tech delivery in the same month, in early March, that allowed us to work into that scale, and the tech stood up, thank God. So we had a whole range of different things going on, almost from that disastrous scenario, something that proved out that our technology could work, and we could help people at a vastly higher scale than we were previously, and change our financial model as well. So a lot of changes that went into that period of time.
That's impressive to see how quickly those pivots can happen when
we're
under pressure like this.
I think a huge point around all of COVID is I think the businesses that are going to come out of it well, and the organizations that are going to come out of it well, will have to have adapted to some rapid changes.
Yes, I think that much is definitely clear. So what does the go forward look like for you? I'm sure murky in some ways, again, lots of unknowns, but what are you thinking about going forward?
Yeah, so and you're right, it's the unknowns that really are on our mind. So the model we had before of charging the people that got the help versus having a local government authority back us, we don't know. 3 months from now, is that model where the local authority needs our help still going to be here? We really hope so, and we're still contracting and speaking with others, but we actually don't know if that model is a temporary thing where they really need the help, but that's going to tailor off, or if there's a second wave of COVID. We're kind of uncertain. As other things change, like lockdown rules and how you social distance change, will our service go back to what we used to do? And how do we legislate for that kind of stuff? What we did before as well was kind of unique. There weren't that many organizations in the UK that do what we do. There's many other charities that do befriending, but actually the things we were doing beyond befriending, like changing the light bulb or helping with a small task in the home, many charities restrict their volunteers from doing it because there's different safeguarding risks. Being smaller and newer, we were able to take some of that risk. But during COVID, we've seen many others start up. And in the weird world that we live in, some of that causes duplication. So we're also got our eyes on that kind of thing too. And then ultimately behind all that, we're starting to take the service to different areas. So we had some corporates approach us about volunteering for their staff. They'd actually stopped corporate volunteering. Mm-hmm. And we had one large building society, essentially a bank over here, approach us to say, hey, can you help us start up local volunteering in a safe way again? Which feels like a different opportunity for us to try and build some tech around. So we're exploring that as well.
That's great. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about, those adaptations and pivots. You've both shared a lot about all the things that you're doing. What are you seeing with your peers? How are they shifting gears? Sanjay, can you start us off? And then Wes, would love to hear from you too.
So from the peer groups, we saw a lot of people. It's always been a really nice space to be in, helping vulnerable in the community. And there's been other services that have been doing similar things, but we've fit it in really nicely. Like there's another group in the UK called Good Gym, who help in a group. So it's a group of runners that go and do a bigger task. So if we were helping an older adult in the community and they wanted their garden cleared, but it was a huge job, hey, we'd go and tell Good Jim, bring your team over and do it. And similarly, they'd say, hey, this person with help with their garden clear out needs some shopping, get one of your volunteers involved. And we've seen some shifts in how people we've worked with really nicely have actually started doing very similar things to us. And so we're seeing some of that. I guess it's in a strange way, it's kind of a rise of competition. And then we've seen national players too. So in the UK, we've got the National Health Service. They've also started a volunteering app, and it's been tremendous. Like they've helped hundreds of thousands, so a different scale to us. But they're unable to do some of the things that we've done because we've been around a couple of years. So they're unable to do ID checks and police checks on the volunteers, which kind of works in the scenario we're in now where things are done at a distance. But as soon as lockdown reduces and we're going to people's houses again, the safety issues become different again. So there's a mix of competition or others in the space or peers that have arisen, and how we work with them becomes really, really interesting going forward.
Interesting examples. Wes, how about you? What have you been seeing in your peer groups?
Yeah, I think similar to Sanjay, I think we're fortunate that I think within our industry and certainly within the space we work in, serving youth and serving within school districts, there's great collaboration. And I think that, there's been a lot of kind of trying to navigate and understand the unknown together. And I think, Sanjay mentioned earlier, and I think it's such an important aspect, the adaptability and being able to adapt. And I think you see some who are able to adapt quickly and are recognizing that we have to totally change the way in which we're operating our program and organization in order to best serve our constituency. And then, to be honest, you see some who kind of are hoping that this will just go away soon and that we can get back our program the way that it should. And I think that more of those are recognizing that that's no longer a position that can be taken given kind of the uncertainty of this landscape. So I think you see a little bit of everything, but I think by and large, most in the industry and in our area of the sector are adapting quickly and collaborating together where possible to understand how can we share resources, how can we support each other, where necessary. I think even in the States and in our area with the payroll protection opportunity from the government, there were a lot of kind of restrictions and uncertainty about applying for that and what's forgiven. And so I think that there was a great coming together of the network to try and navigate that unknown together, so that we all felt like, we were making smart financial decisions for our organizations.
I think I definitely agree. Even with the increased competition, something that we all over is increased collaboration as well, which is great to see. So you mentioned a little bit about adjusting financials, and Sanjay, I know you talked about what you did in your organization, but Wes, how about you? How have you had to adjust that fundraising and that budgeting outlook?
Yeah, I mean, pretty quickly right away, we cut about $40,000 of non-essential expenses from our budget, just recognizing that the future was going to be uncertain and murky, and so we wanted to try and mitigate our risk as much as possible. And so we made that decision pretty quickly. We are, our fiscal year just ends today actually, and our next fiscal year is beginning in July. And so for budgeting for this coming year, I think that we really feel like this is a very uncertain year. We have a portion of our revenue that comes from our partners. So a portion's a fee-for-service model, and there's broad uncertainty in terms of school district budgets, local and state budgets. And so we're trying to navigate that piece with our partners right now and understand how we may be impacted. And so we've really tried to slim down our budget. My position has really been focusing first and foremost on the highest priority of our personnel and staff and trying to maintain our staffing through this situation and then cut back on everything else that we can. Certainly from a fundraising aspect, we had a fundraising event, an in-person type of gala event, if you will, scheduled for the end of April. That certainly we had to pivot and shift quickly. And so we transitioned to an online fundraiser that was a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign. And we just concluded that, and thankfully we're able to surpass our goals. So, and I think Sanjay alluded to this. I think it's you learn what you're capable of sometimes in these situations by being forced to adapt. And I think we would have never thought that we could pivot an entire event and portion of our budget within 4 to 5 weeks, but we were able to quickly do so, and thankfully our network saw the need and wanted to support us through that. And so looking into next year, we're kind of laying out options for both in-person and virtual. I think that we're recognizing that it's most likely going to be virtual even into next spring. And so how do we talk with our funders? Thankfully, the funding community, especially from the private and family foundation aspect, has been very supportive in really relaxing requirements of certain grants, providing more open-ended funding to be able to support through a very uncertain time. So we're grateful for that as well.
That's great. Well, it sounds like you've a number of really smart moves so far. Who or what or where do you turn to help you with these decisions?
I can go,
Okay.
and then kick it over to Sanjay. Certainly, I think mentors. I've mentors that have been a great resource to kind of bounce ideas and thoughts off of. I think as we were discussing, that peer network. Leaders of other organizations in the space and in the area, and I think trying to have open-ended conversations with staff. Recognizing this is new to all of us, getting their thoughts and buy-in as far as how we navigate such an uncertain landscape, and working through it together in that aspect.
Sanjay, how about you?
Yeah,
any that you turn?
I'd say very, very, very similar. So we've got a very small board. There's 3 members, and they're all pretty nimble, used to working in small organizations that can shift relatively quickly. And then, like Wes says, your staff probably know your business, as the best, and they'll have some fantastic ideas. So definitely the staff, and then probably seeing those opportunities arise, and maybe they're different than they were before, but if there's something about them that says, yeah, we should really try that, it's completely different to what we did before, but it leads to a different opportunity. Some of that is probably needed in the period we've been through.
Absolutely. Are there any other lessons that you've taken away from all of this about your organization, ones that you can learn and grow from?
Yeah, sure. So we are, or certainly we're still quite young. We're 2 years in. Our tech is still really early stage, but it's the technology that's allowed us to survive in this period. And to a certain extent, we've grown during this period because of the volume the volume of demand that's come our way through local governments. But it was only because of the tech that we managed to be able to take on those types of contracts and service them really well. So we always want to be a tech company, but this is massively reinforced that it's got to be a tech-led venture for us to grow and be a national, have a national presence, which is where we want to aim to be.
That's a learning. How about you, Wes? Any big learnings that you can take forward with your organization to help you grow?
Sure. I think, 2 things that come first and foremost to mind. First and foremost is the resiliency and commitment of our volunteers. Not that it was overly surprising because we know how incredible our volunteers are, but just the way in which, many of them have said, if you had said to me 6 months ago, would I consider doing a virtual tutoring program, I would have said, absolutely no way. But, given the landscape and given the need, and they're recognizing that students are falling even further behind in these times, they want to do whatever it takes to, support students. And so they are all in on, working virtually with students via Zoom or other platforms. And, our response rate, so we do at the end of the year, kind of a intent to serve survey, if you will, about volunteers that want to return the next school year. And resoundingly, our volunteers across the board have all said they want to come back even though it will be an entirely new program that is virtual. And that says a lot about the wonderful volunteer corps that we have. I think the other aspect is the supporting the personal and emotional well-being of our staff. I think that, there has been a lot going on that has been extremely heavy on our staff personally, whether they or their loved ones have been impacted by coronavirus, by the COVID, 19, or even the, current things going on in our country around systemic racism. We are an organization that predominantly serves communities of color. And so there are a lot of our staff that are going through a lot. And so how we provide that space and we support them through that, one of the things that we've done as we've gone virtually is not only kind of increase our staff meetings to once a week, but we also increased a kind of staff well-being check-in once a week as well, where it's just talking about how are you doing, what are some of the things that you're doing to take care of yourself, to kind of really make it not about the work and about them and how they're navigating many of these difficult situations.
Well, those are important learnings. Thank you for sharing. I will want to take these last minutes to turn it over to our audience for their Q&A. So just a reminder, if you're on Zoom, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button. If you're on Facebook, you can just comment your question. We'll get that in the Zoom Q&A too. So first and foremost, I'd like to ask both of you this. Wes, let's start with you. What critical tactic or characteristic is essential, do you think, for a non-going forward in crisis times?
I think we talked about it throughout this, adaptability. I think being willing to adapt, one thing we as an organization at the beginning of this fiscal year, so this past July, implemented a new strategic plan that was really focused on the growth of the organization and growing to serve additional school districts. And, then the pandemic hit and we had to totally pivot and put that on hold and think differently about what our growth looks like, how we are focused on our existing partners and existing students and expanding within our existing school districts. And so I think you have to be willing to adapt. You can't be too stubborn to say, no, this is what we do and we're going to stick to it. And I think you see that those that are willing to adapt are the ones that usually come out of these types of situations in good shape. And I think also recognizing the opportunity. Sanjay talked a little bit about this, with his organization, for us, a shift to virtual we see as not just a short-term solution, but also a tool that can support our program long-term, even when we do return to in-person programming. And so, we have volunteers who are sick, come January. And so we could use this virtual platform to have a substitute volunteer step in to support that student so that there's consistency for that student throughout the year and they're not missing a session. And so we're really looking at it as a not just a short-term solution, but a long-term impact on the organization.
Couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And Sanjay, how about you? Is there any other skills that you would highlight?
Yeah, I'll probably echo Wes a lot here. It's how you make decisions in this new world, right? So I think decision making is always been tough, but in our new world, you've got to make decisions where you have even less information than before on what the outcomes are going to be or what the world's going to be like in 2 to 3 months. And so how you make decisions in that environment, I don't know, I don't think I've ever been in an environment like that. But somehow you need to get beyond that, try and look for the opportunities and grab one. And you may not have everything you'd usually want to make that decision. But if you don't, I think you have bigger problems.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you. So I do see that we're at time, so we're going to wrap it up for today, but we are going to be hosting these discussions regularly on various topics, and we want these as help topics. We want to hear you want to hear. So there's a survey at the end. Please fill it out. If you're on Facebook, it's actually pinned to the top of the comments. It takes just a couple of minutes. Let us know what topics you want to hear about. You can also send your questions or topic suggestions to homeofficehours@vista.com. So we like to wrap these up by asking the guests what their one key takeaway is from the discussion. So Wes, can you start us off? What would yours be?
You know, I think the adaptability, which we talked about throughout this, I think another one that I love that Sanjay just tapped on, and that I always say with my team is keep moving forward. I think, you know, you have to recognize that you're going to make mistakes. Things are not going to always go the way that you want them to, but you have to keep moving forward. And that, you know, one of the things we recognize in these times is that you may not be able to do things to the same you know, extent that you normally would in terms of the, you know, the depth that you would go, but that you need to keep making decisions, keep making moving forward, and recognize that that's okay, because you're still heading in the right direction. So you know, keep moving forward.
Excellent advice. Thank you. Sanjay, how about you? A final thought to leave us with?
Yeah, I'm going to echo the same. It is at this point in time. It has to be keep moving forward, keep going. Something will break, and give you a break. Grab hold of that. Keep going. You'll come out of it.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the audience for taking the time to be here with us today. And Sanjay and Wes, thank you so much for joining us. Definitely appreciate you taking the time to share this advice and thoughts with us. So, this has been Home Office Hours Live with Vistaprint, and thank you for your curiosity and your time. We'll see you in the next episode.